She said I was controlling, just because I asked why our shared card kept getting declined. I let her talk. I let her swipe. I let the statements pile up. Turns out, her phase had a recurring subscription and a backup boyfriend. We'd been married 5 years. No kids. Just joint responsibilities, joint space, joint silence. She was always the free spirit type. Oil paints, weekend workshops, long baths with piano music playing softly in the background. I didn't mind. I handled the spreadsheets, the car maintenance, the dull, unartistic parts of life she didn't want to dwell on. That was the arrangement. Her fire, my ground. When the ground started to crack, I didn't notice at first. Or maybe I didn't want to. She stopped working, said she needed to recenter. Then came the vague outings. More nights out. More don't wait up. But the real shift happened when I started asking. Not accusing, not prying, just asking. And she called me controlling. That was the moment. Not the first betrayal, but the first rewrite. I didn't correct her. I just started paying attention. It was supposed to be a simple Friday night. Our usual spot, second booth by the window. A place that still knew us as a couple, not as individuals passing through. The sushi tasted fine. The conversation was thin. I was tired. She was distracted, smiling at something on her phone. When the bill came, I handed over the joint card. A moment later, the waiter returned, polite, apologetic, discreet. Declined. She burst out laughing, loud enough to turn a few heads. Did you order a new guitar without telling me again? I smiled barely. I hadn't bought anything, not even coffee, that I could remember. She fished out cash from her purse, handed it over with a grin, and tossed in a tip that felt like overkill. On the way out, she was still chuckling. I nodded, said nothing, but something inside me folded. Not broken, just creased. The next morning, I asked about the card. Calmly. No accusation, no raised voice, just curiosity. She was in the kitchen, still in her robe, scrolling through her phone while the kettle screamed. I mentioned the decline, asked if she'd noticed anything unusual with the account. She rolled her eyes without looking up. God, you're always so dramatic. It hit harder than I expected. Not the words. I'd heard sharper, but the ease with which she deflected. She said she was just experimenting, trying new things, finding herself again. A phase. As if the missing money, the dwindling balance, the random charges, as if all of that was part of her personal evolution. When I asked if she could show me the receipts, she looked at me like I'd just asked to read her journal. Suddenly, I was the invasive one, the insecure one. I walked away nodding. Not in agreement, in recognition. The shift had begun. The facts were blurry now, and my role was being rewritten in real time. I didn't protest. I just started writing my own version, quietly, on a mental page she didn't know existed. I didn't go looking for confirmation. It just showed up, like most things that ruin you. Quiet. Casual. In the middle of grocery shopping. I'd run out of olive oil. That's what got me to the store. The kind of errand she used to romanticize when we were newly married. Slow living, she called it. Now it was just me, walking between shelves under fluorescent lights, checking expiration dates on instinct. And then I saw him, Nate. Her old yoga instructor. Man bun, linen shirt, the whole spiritual dude aesthetic she used to obsess over. We hadn't seen each other in at least a year. Back then, he used to lead sunrise classes she never made it to, but swore changed her life. He looked surprised to see me. Said, "Hey man, didn't think I'd catch you before the retreat." I paused. Retreat. He blinked, the way people do when they realize they've stepped out of turn. Oh, yeah, the one this weekend. Upstate. Thought she said you were going too. I stared at a box of dry spaghetti like it held a better answer. She'd told me she was visiting her sister. Said they were going to have a girls' weekend. The kind that always ended in vague stories and crystals in her purse. Nate's face shifted. Not guilty, just uncomfortable. He smiled, adjusted the conversation, asked something about kombucha. I mumbled something back. We parted ways by the freezer section. I stood there with nothing in my hands. Didn't even remember what I came for. Just stared at condensation dripping down glass doors. That evening, she came home a little too refreshed. Hair freshly blown out. Eyes glassy with whatever post-spa enlightenment she was marketing to herself. She talked about how peaceful her sister's new place was. Said the air felt different. She described a showerhead like it was a religious experience. I nodded. Asked nothing. I didn't want the lie. I wanted to see how easily she'd sell it. And she did, smoothly. like someone who'd practiced the beats. Location, emotion, gratitude, transition. It was storytelling. She wasn't even talking to me anymore. Just rehearsing for her next conversation. Her next post. Her next version of the truth. I watched her unpack a tote bag that didn't look used. No shampoo bottles. No receipts. Just a single folded blanket that smelled like eucalyptus and someone else's detergent. I didn't bring up Nate. I didn't bring up the retreat. I didn't bring up anything. Because if someone's lying with that much rhythm, interrupting them is like breaking into a performance. All you get is an awkward silence. And maybe a new role. The villain, the interrogator, the unspiritual man who doesn't get it. So I let her monologue. Let her paint the weekend in soft brushstrokes. And I filed the moment away. Not as evidence. Not yet. But as the first real crack. It started with a mistake. Mine, technically, though I've stopped thinking in terms like that. We had a shared email. For bills, delivery notifications, flight confirmations. The kind of inbox couples create when they believe in longevity. I rarely checked it. She handled most of the subscriptions. I trusted her. One morning, while half awake, I opened it by reflex on my phone, just checking to see if the insurance payment had gone through. At the top was a receipt. Thank you for your renewal. The Feminine Reclamation Circle, $299/monthly tier. I reread it twice. I had no idea what that was. There was a small logo, floral, vaguely cultish, and a line that said, "Your community of radical receivership, sensual sovereignty, and relationship rewilding awaits." I stared at those words like they were written in code. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I did. This wasn't about wellness. This was about justification. She hadn't mentioned it. Not once. I didn't confront her. I archived the email and started paying attention. Not to her, to the numbers. Over the next few weeks, I checked the account daily. I'd never done that before. I noticed patterns. Midweek Uber rides, never from home. Charges from boutique hotels, same city, different zip code. Lingerie purchases, from brands she used to call too performative. None of it ever showed up in our house. None of it was for me. She always looked tired but fresh. Like someone coming back from something she couldn't name. And I started noticing other shifts. She'd leave for coffee with Megan, but come back without caffeine breath. She started using phrases like my individual path and holding space for my truth. I wasn't angry, just dissociated. Like I was watching her try on new identities like coats. And I wasn't in any of them. She still smiled at me, still kissed my forehead, still posted old photos of us on anniversaries. But the version of me in those photos was no longer relevant. I had become a background character in her personal brand. The husband who doesn't get in the way. The one who supports her growth. Growth, apparently, billed monthly. Every receipt was a breadcrumb. Not a trail I planned to follow, just one I planned to keep. Because I knew how this story was going to be told when it ended. That she was brave. That she evolved. That she broke free of something stifling. And I needed to remember that I didn't build the cage. I just paid for it. There's a moment that keeps circling back. I didn't realize how important it was until everything else fell apart. It was a Sunday afternoon. Months ago, maybe a year. She had spent the morning in what she called a ceremonial mood. I came home from a grocery run to find her walking slowly around the apartment with a smudged stick, burning sage, whispering things under her breath. The windows were open, piano music playing from her phone, a white scarf tied around her head like a makeshift priestess. I asked if everything was okay. She said she was letting go of her past self. I remember thinking that was poetic. Brave, even. She cried quietly afterward, curled up on the couch. I brought her tea, sat beside her without asking questions. She said she felt lighter. I told her I was proud of her. I meant it. Back then, I thought it was personal growth. But memory doesn't sit still. It mutates. It develops sharper teeth when you feed it with new information. Now, I see that day differently. She wasn't letting go of the past. She was rehearsing, soft-launching a transformation that had already begun behind my back. The sage, the sobbing, the scarves, it wasn't healing. It was mourning. Not for herself. Not for trauma. For the version of her life she'd already started to discard. The version that included me. She was grieving a marriage she hadn't told me was ending. That day wasn't a pivot. It was a quiet burial. And I had brought the tea to the funeral. I started replaying other moments like that. The afternoon she came back from a visioning hike and threw away 3 of our framed photos. The time she deleted her old Instagram and started fresh, captioning her new profile with, "Becoming. Always becoming." At the time, I thought it was artsy, meaningful. Now I wonder if that was the first time she erased me in public. When someone leaves you silently, it's not a slam of the door. It's a long, quiet unfollowing of your existence. They pack their identity in pieces, first emotionally, then logistically. The suitcase gets zipped long before you even see it in the hallway. That Sunday with the sage wasn't about energy. It was about exit strategy. I remember the way the sunlight came through the blinds that afternoon, catching in the smoke as it curled and disappeared. I stood in that room, breathing in the same air, thinking we were both part of a ritual. But only one of us was. She called it healing. Now I call it foreshadowing. And the worst part? I didn't even recognize the moment as a warning. I smiled. I supported her. I thought we were growing together. Turns out, I was just standing still while she repainted the map. Her family had always been polite with me. Not warm, not distant, just comfortably neutral. The kind of relationship where birthdays get remembered, small talk flows easily, and no one asks real questions. That was the rhythm for years. Until one evening, it wasn't. We were invited over for dinner. Just the five of us, her parents, her younger sister, and us. It used to feel like routine, almost background noise in our life. This time, something in the atmosphere changed before we even stepped through the door. Her mom didn't hug me. She said hello, but her eyes didn't hold the usual flicker of curiosity. Her dad offered me a beer, but looked past me when I took it. I told myself I was overthinking it. Dinner was homemade pasta, heavy on the olive oil, just like her mom always made it. I used to get compliments on how much I ate. Real man appetite, her dad joked once. This time, no one noticed if I had seconds. Her sister did most of the talking. She'd gone through 3 breakups in 2 years and had a new therapist every season. Usually, she spun it into something entertaining. But this time, her commentary had an edge. Some people just outgrow what they thought they wanted, she said, spearing a cherry tomato like it had wronged her. Then added, without looking at either of us. And when people change, they drift. That's not bad, just honest. Her mom nodded. Her dad refilled his wine. No one looked at me. My wife smiled faintly, as if that was wisdom we could all agree on. As if it had nothing to do with us. I chewed slowly, the taste of garlic turning metallic in my mouth. That's when it hit me. I wasn't being warned. I was being prepared. They knew. Or at least, they knew her version. I'd been quietly demoted from husband to house guest. This wasn't a dinner. It was a soft launch. A pilot episode for the breakup narrative she'd been curating behind the scenes. And I wasn't just excluded from the conversation. I was being written out entirely, like a character whose arc had ended, kept around for one last sentimental scene before the spinoff. I thought about all the Sunday lunches, the holiday trips, the birthday gifts that took too long to pick out. How many of those still lived in their memories? And how many had been overwritten? After dessert, her dad said something about life coming in phases. She looked at me when he said it. I smiled. There was no point in asking questions at that table. Answers had already been distributed, and I hadn't received my copy. We drove home in silence. She played music softly through the car speakers. I don't remember the song, but I do remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be erased politely. It happened at a friend's engagement party, the kind with string lights, Instagram walls, and enough Prosecco to keep everyone smiling through mild resentment. She wore a long green dress I'd never seen before. Said she bought it on a whim. I knew the brand. It was expensive. It wasn't on our credit card, which meant it wasn't ours. I kept my smile on autopilot. Said hi to the usual people. Clinked glasses. Pretended I hadn't been feeling like an understudy in my own relationship for months. But the moment happened quietly. No announcement. No spotlight. Just erosion. She pulled away when I tried to put my hand on her back. Subtle. Almost graceful, like she was brushing hair off her shoulder. It was nothing. Until it wasn't. Then she made a toast. She wasn't supposed to. She wasn't part of the bridal party. But someone handed her the mic, and she never turned one down. She stood up, smiled, thanked the couple, and then launched into something that sounded like poetry if you weren't listening too closely. She talked about growth, about how love was about evolution, not possession. She said she admired couples who grew together instead of just coexisting. There was laughter, a few nods. It landed well. It always did. No one looked at me. No one needed to. I raised my glass, the way I was supposed to. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I wasn't angry. Just weightless. Like something had finally snapped, but so quietly it barely registered as a break. That speech wasn't about the couple. It wasn't even about us. It was a PR move. A reframing. She was publicly aligning herself with the next chapter, whatever that looked like, and I was being filed under chapter she grew out of. Afterward, someone patted my back and said, "You're lucky. She's got such a strong voice." I smiled. I always did. But something settled in me that night. Not rage, not even betrayal. Just certainty. She wasn't just rewriting our story in private. She was performing it now, and I was no longer a co-writer. Just a reference. A cautionary tale in a well-lit dress. On the way home, she hummed the song they played during the couple's dance. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. She didn't notice. That was the final confirmation. When someone stops noticing your silence, they've already stopped listening. There was no final straw. No screaming match. No discovery that shattered everything at once. Just a growing, silent clarity, like mist evaporating to show a landscape you didn't realize you'd been walking through blind. So I did what I know how to do. I opened Excel. Blank spreadsheet. Top left cell, joint finances, review. I gave it a timestamp. Created folders. Color-coded categories. It looked clinical. Clean. Almost therapeutic. Column A, date. B, transaction. C, description. D, anomaly. I went back 6 months. At first, it felt invasive. Like I was violating something sacred. Not hers, but mine. I'd never had to track my wife. I was the grounded one. The one who trusted systems. But this wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about preparing for impact. The data didn't lie. Boutique hotel charges under a fake wellness app. Duplicate Uber routes. Spending patterns that had nothing to do with us. Not our life, not our schedules, not our rhythm. There were whole weekends that had been relabeled in my mind. Visiting her sister, artist retreat, digital detox. But the timestamps told a different story. This was never about the money. It was about narrative. She was building a case for freedom, and I was expected to fund it quietly. I canceled one of our credit cards, the one I'd opened for shared purchases. I moved a portion of our savings into an individual account, left the rest untouched. She never noticed. Or if she did, she didn't ask. I updated the shared budget document with the same numbers as always, a ghost version of reality, just enough to keep the performance intact. I started sleeping better. Funny how that works. When you stop clinging to something that's already let go of you. I changed a few passwords. Stopped forwarding receipts. Not out of spite. Just deficiency. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for months, it didn't vanish. But it stabilized. I knew where it came from now. And more importantly, I knew where it was headed. She kept moving through her rituals. Moon journaling. Wine with soul sisters. Nights spent processing. I let her. I didn't question anything. She interpreted that as growth. Told her therapist I was finally supporting her evolution. Let her have that version. She needed a clean contrast. A control narrative. Meanwhile, I built my own, one row at a time. Every spreadsheet cell was a breadcrumb. Not toward confrontation. Toward exit. And I think that's when I felt the shift. Not in our relationship. That had already died. But in myself. I wasn't waiting for her to change anymore. I wasn't hoping for answers or apologies or clarity. I just wanted structure. A framework. Something that would hold its shape when everything else collapsed. And strangely, that spreadsheet, cold, quiet, unsentimental, became the most honest thing in our marriage. The law office was colder than I expected. Or maybe I was just numb. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. No slammed doors, no overnight bag by the hallway mirror. Just an appointment on my calendar labeled plainly, initial consultation. I didn't even tell her I was going. The lawyer's office was beige and efficient. The kind of space built for quiet collapses. She asked me what I was looking for. I handed her the file. 15 tabs in the spreadsheet. Screenshots. Statements. Timestamps. 6 months of restraint, recorded in clean rows and silent math. No accusations. No commentary. Just the numbers. Just the paper trail. She flipped through it slowly. Didn't ask for clarification. Just nodded in the rhythm of someone watching the shape of a story emerge. Not from words, but from patterns. Then she looked up and asked the question. Do you want to fight for more? I thought about it. The condo. The car. The accounts we used to call ours. I thought about the lies, the gaslighting, the redirections. The silence. The performance. The version of me that had been paraded around to support her growth, all while she rehearsed her exit. But I didn't feel angry. Just finished. No, I said. I just want it written down. All of it. I didn't need a war. I needed a record. Something neutral. Unemotional. A translation of what had happened into something no one could reframe later. She would have her story, her phase, her rebirth, her self-discovery arc. She could say I was cold, absent, controlling, even. But she wouldn't say I was petty. She wouldn't say I made it ugly. I left the office with a folder, not a weapon. At home, she was lighting candles. The apartment smelled like patchouli and lavender, a scent I used to find calming. Now it just smelled like revision. She asked how my day was. I said productive. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and went back to her journaling. No idea that she was now living in a chapter I'd already titled Final Draft. It was surreal, how quiet the execution could be. No raised voices. No ultimatums. Just a decision, made calmly, beneath all the noise. A pivot so smooth it looked like stillness. I went to bed early that night. She stayed up past midnight, typing. Probably another blog post. Probably another metaphor about becoming. And I let her write it. Let her build whatever world she needed to keep going. Because I had what I needed now. Proof. Perspective. Peace. And none of it required her permission. The moment she realized it was over wasn't loud. It wasn't when the papers arrived. It wasn't even when she read through them. It was when she looked up and saw my face. Calm, unreadable, and understood I wouldn't be fighting. That's when she cried. Not the performative kind. Not the kind with deep breathing and crystals held to her chest. Real tears. Silent ones. The kind that only fall when someone sees a door closing they thought they could leave open forever. She said I used to fight for us. That I was giving up too easily. That we were just in a phase, just evolving. I didn't argue. She was right about one thing. It was a phase. But it wasn't ours. It was hers. One that came with boutique hotel receipts, abstract language about personal growth, and a perfectly curated version of reality where I had become the anchor weighing her down. The thing about phases is that they're temporary. But this one had a recurring charge, and a second phone number, and a name I'd seen on 2 Lyft receipts, listed as Sam, work contact. She thought I didn't know. Or maybe she thought I wouldn't do anything with it. And to be fair, I didn't. I just let it sit there, like everything else. Unfolding silently, collecting gravity. There's a kind of dignity in not reacting. Not because it hurts less, but because it hurts in a way that finally makes sense. You don't scream when you understand the fire was lit on purpose. You just step back and watch it burn out. She stayed in the apartment for a few more weeks, acting as if things might settle. Told friends we were redefining our connection. Said we were transitioning with compassion. I said nothing. Let her keep the narrative. What I had was better, not louder, just real. Eventually, she left. Packed in silence. No ceremony this time. She didn't even take the sage. I kept the spreadsheet. Not as a weapon. Just a reminder. Of what happens when you're written out of someone's life. Even as they ask you to keep funding the story. Months later, a mutual friend sent me a link. She had launched a new website. Coaching, of course. Helping women break free from controlling dynamics and rediscover their sovereign self. Her About page had a photo of her standing barefoot in a field. The caption read, "I broke the cycle and built myself from ashes." I smiled. Closed the tab. Some people think silence is weakness. That not correcting the record is the same as admitting guilt. But sometimes silence is the loudest answer you can give. Because it means you've left the conversation completely. She still posts quotes about healing. Still hosts online retreats. Still talks about the version of her life she escaped. But I'm not part of that story anymore. And she knows it. Even her new life, the one she calls authentic, has to keep a calendar reminder. A monthly charge. A quiet paper trail. To remember when the phase began. I don't. If you never tried to control them, just remembered everything, does that still make you the villain?